Hello and welcome back to this beginner Python tutorial series. In today's video, we're going to learn about functions. First up, if you find these tutorials helpful, leave a like and hit the subscribe button to see more of this content. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear understanding of what functions are and how to use them. So first up, let's find out what are functions in Python. They are reusable blocks of code that you can call whenever you need to perform a specific task. So imagine you're baking a cake and you need to follow a recipe in order to make the cake. Functions work in a very similar way. Functions have a name, parameters, which are inputs, and a return value, which is an output. They allow us to write cleaner and more organized code. To define a function in Python, we use the def keyword followed by the function name, parentheses, and a colon. Whatever we want to include in our function will be all the lines indented below our function name. So here's an example. We use the def keyword followed by our function name, which is greet in this case, with open close parentheses and the colon, and then we indent to print out hello world. We can then call this function just by saying its name by open and close parentheses. So we can go ahead and run this, and we can see that the output is hello world. So if we go ahead and call this function a few more times, and we go ahead and run this, we can see it's printing out hello world as many times as we called it. So cool, that was easy to set up. You will hear the terms arguments and parameters used interchangeably, but there actually is a difference between them. Parameters are variables listed in the function definition, whereas arguments are what we pass into the function when we actually call the function. So function arguments allow us to customize the behavior of a function. And so here we've modified our function declaration by adding a parameter name here, and then we are using that inside of our print statement. And we've now added an argument into our greet functions down here when we call them. So the first one is Zektech and the second one is Bob. So whenever we go ahead and run this, we can see it saying hello Zektech and hello Bob. Whenever you call a function that has more than one parameter, you provide arguments that match the parameter's order. So in this case, we have the parameter's name and extra words, and we're using them in both of our print statements inside the function. So whenever we call this greet command, we have the first argument as Zektech and the second one as cool. So whenever we go ahead and run this, it prints out hello Zektech and you are cool. And just to show you that order does matter, we'll go ahead and provide this greet function with the arguments in the flipped order. So whenever we go ahead and run this, we can see that the first one ran with hello Zektech and you are cool. The second one ran with hello cool, you are Zektech. Functions can also return values using the return keyword. This lets you use functions result inside of your code. If you don't use a return keyword, the functions in Python default to returning a none value. So we'll go ahead and test this here by having an add function taking in two parameters of a and b and adding them together inside of the function. And we aren't returning anything. So whenever we go ahead and assign this sum result equals to add, it should give us a none value, and we'll go ahead and print it. So whenever we go ahead and run this, it does give us none. But if we go ahead and add this return result right here and we run it again, it gives us 8 as we are adding 5 and 3. Sometimes functions will have default values for their parameters, and you can override these default values if you need to. So going back to the greet function that we had our variable name, but now we're assigning it to a default value of guest. And so if we don't pass any arguments into this function, it will use this default value here whenever it prints out this statement. So here we're calling greet with no arguments being passed in. Then we're calling greet again below it, passing in arguments. So whenever we go ahead and run this, we can see it prints hello guest, hello Zektech, and banana. And we can see since we didn't provide any arguments, it used the default value of guest here. And whenever there is a parameter with a default value in here, we can specify that inside the function whenever we're calling it. So we can say name equals Zektech and name equals banana, and whenever we go ahead and run this, it does the exact same output. Whenever you have parameters that need to be passed in, or name parameters, in this case default parameters, the default parameters need to come after all of the parameters that need to be passed in. If we came over here and set a parameter of 2, you can see that I'm getting an error here by Pylance because it does not like that, and it does not work like that. But these functions will not work having these name parameters or default parameters in between like this, or even first. They always have to go at the end of your function declaration. And so this also is the same for whenever you're passing in arguments. So as our first parameter is greeting and our second one is a default parameter of guest, whenever we call this greet function, we can pass in hello as our greeting and we don't need to pass in a name. For the second function call right here, we're passing in hello as our argument for the greeting parameter. And then the second argument is setting the name parameter inside this function. And this is all fine. But the third time we're calling this greet function, our first argument is the name parameter. And we're setting that before our required parameter of greeting. So this hello argument does not work in this situation. If we were to try to run this, we can see that positional arguments follow keyword argument. So sometimes you'll see a strange syntax of star args or star kwargs in a function. These allow us to catch the extra arguments passed that we don't have parameters for. So in this case, we have our function greet, and our first parameter is name, and then we have a star args catching all other parameters after that. So we're printing hello the person, the type of our arguments, and we'll go ahead and print them out as well. And so we call the greet function with zectech as our first argument, and then we're passing in 1, 2, 3, 4 as the next arguments. So whenever we go ahead and run this, we can see that it's printing hello zectech, and the type of our arguments that's catching all of the other arguments is actually a tuple. And so whenever we print it, it prints it as a tuple. And so we can access the values of this tuple just like we could with regular tuples. So if we run this again, it's printing out 2 since that is in the second position, which is number 1 inside these brackets. Here's an example with star kwargs, and this will capture any extra arguments that you name while passing in. So in this case, we have our greet function and our first argument is zectech, and then we have named arguments of values equals the list of 1, 2, 3, 4, and banana equals true. So if we go ahead and run this, we can see that it actually captures these named parameters into a dictionary of values 1, 2, 3, 4, and banana of true. And we can see that it is printing out right here the dictionary as the type. And then you can access these values just like a regular dictionary. And so we can also use both of them together like this. We have our greet function with the name parameter, then star args and star kwargs. And the KW does stand for keyword arguments. But here we're printing out hello and the name, then printing our args and our keyword arguments. So whenever we go ahead and run this, we can see it's printing hello zectech, our keyword arguments of 1, 2, since those are right here, and our values of 1, 2, 3, 4 as a list, since that is the named argument right here. Sometimes when you're writing code or you're looking through other people's code, you'll see that in their function, they have the pass keyword or an ellipses of 3 dots. These essentially do the same thing where there's no implementation details, meaning we don't have any code in here that needs to run just yet, and we'll implement it later. But just to show them no errors, we go ahead and do this. That way we have our function declared. And we can even call functions inside other functions. So here we have a function hi that just prints hi. And then we have our function greet that takes in a name parameter and it says hello to that person, and we call the hi function. So if we call greet zectech, we'll go ahead and run it, prints hello zectech, and it says hi since it called that function. If we need a function that's only going to be called inside one of our other functions, and we don't really need it anywhere else in the code, we can put it inside our function by indenting it and declaring it like we did before. So in this case, we have the hi function, and it does print hi again, and we still print our greeting, and then we call the hi function. So if we run this, we can see it has the exact same output. And we can see here, if we try calling this hi function outside of the greet function, it does not work, saying it is not defined, because this function only exists within this other function. And there you have it, an introduction to Python functions. Now you know how to define functions, pass parameters, and get results back. Keep practicing and experimenting with functions to become a coding wizard. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more beginner-friendly Python tutorials. And I'll see you in the next one.